So I began focusing a little bit more on behavioral science, applying the ideas of people like Bob Cialdini or other scientists, and using some of these really useful academic concepts that were coming out of laboratories that really didn't have a lot of exposure to the business world.
This, what you said right now, is for me very personal informations because all the time when I work in marketing, many people see only on the results, only on analytics. And sometimes I feel that I burn inside because I give more attention for emotional people, for what they feel.
I have, I think, really important question about ethics in neuromarketing, because many people have some thoughts about applying marketing and neuromarketing techniques. And how do you respond to ethical concerns about neuromarketing, particularly to view that it might be used for manipulation?
Hi, welcome on the Neuromarketing on Allegro podcast, where we explore ways to make the products you sell online among the most preferred. My name is Karolina Albanowska, and I'm the owner of Alba Marketing, a company specializing in research and training in the field of neuromarketing.
And I'm Tomasz Świętoniowski, and I've been running training sessions and consultations for business owners for many years, helping them grow their companies. I own an agency specializing in boosting sales on Allegro.
In today's episode, we introduce you to special guest, Roger Dooley. He's the author of the book Brainfluence, telling about neuromarketing. His focus is on helping you market and sell better using brain science and behavior research. We'll talk about the latest interesting facts about neuromarketing, AI, and empathy. All of this is designed to help you build a better business. Ready? Let's get started. Roger, Tomek invited you to our podcast. Of course, I'm really glad with that because I'm your very big fan. And please tell us something about yourself, about your success, about your books, about your neuromarketing knowledge.
Well, I guess to tell my whole story would probably take the entire length of this podcast, so I'll make it brief. I started off as an engineer by education, only did that for a few years, moved into management, and by the time I was 30, I was in charge of strategy for a Fortune 1000 company, which I thought was really a cool job. And then at that point, I threw it away and I became an entrepreneur in the early days of home computers. And I've been kind of an entrepreneur ever since. Different ventures in direct marketing, in IT and technology. And then about probably 15 years ago, or actually a little bit more than that now, I saw the confluence of two areas, neuroscience and marketing. These areas were coming together. I wasn't the only person to see that. There were some early neuromarketing startups at that point trying to help companies understand how well their ads worked. And I began writing about it. That writing got traction, initially a blog, and that led to my first book, Brainfluence, that has been distributed globally. It's in, I think, 11 languages now, including Polish. And that really, I think, I enjoyed seeing the impact that I had in people's marketing. We're teaching them some ways that they could use inexpensive techniques based on neuroscience and based on behavioral science to improve their marketing. That led ultimately to my second book, Friction, which is all about how effort, in particular unnecessary effort, controls human behavior and how marketers and business people can use that knowledge, use the fact that there is what Nobel winner Daniel Kahneman calls a law of least effort to improve their customer experience, improve their employee experience, and create customer loyalty, reduce employee turnover, and increase employee engagement. All these things are affected by wasted effort, which I and other people call friction. So to me, it sounds like a simple concept, but it has its roots in sound behavioral science. And it's surprising when people say, oh, well, we know about friction. It's amazing how much friction there is in the world today, everywhere, even big brands, small brands. You find customer experiences that are just not as easy as they could be.
Okay, I want to tell you something about your book, Brainfluence. It wasn't discussed with Karolina, and I hope she wasn't mad at me at this moment. But when I met her first time and we started talking about marketing and neuromarketing, she started talking about neuromarketing and your book. And she told me that she started her interest in neuromarketing with your book, Brainfluence. So, Roger, you have really a big influence on people all over the world, including Karolina.
Exactly.
Well, I appreciate that, and it's good to know that people find the ideas useful. I mean, as an author, there's no greater feeling than to hear somebody where they have found your ideas, they've used them, and they've been useful.
Okay, we've talked about it before this meeting, but probably few of our listeners know about it, that you have some Polish heritage. Could you tell us something about it?
Well, sure. My surname, Dooley, is very Irish, as you might guess, but on my mother's side, I am 100% Polish. Both my grandparents on that side were Polish. They're Polish Americans. Their grandparents, I think, were the actual immigrants in the Buffalo, New York area and Scranton area. And for a while, Buffalo was a huge concentration of Polish Americans. There were entire neighborhoods, and it's a very Polish area. So I grew up in a church where many people spoke Polish. It was a very so it's really a big part of my heritage, and I'm hoping that one of these days I get a chance to actually visit Poland to give a live speech somewhere. I've only visited Poland briefly once, and that was just from a ship, so it was only a matter of less than a day. And I hope to get back and spend some more time there and really sort of discover my heritage.
Do you remember some Polish words?
Oh, na zdrowie. No, not too many. I did not speak any Polish myself, other than the occasional words you hear and you pick up along the way. But and of course, some of the Polish food that I grew up eating, which was also very wonderful. Although I don't even remember all of the names for that now. But it was really, I think, a great heritage.
Do you have any favorite place in Poland?
No, I have really only visited once briefly. So no, I would love to see Warsaw, of course, but there are, from what I've seen, at least on the internet and in magazines, many beautiful places to visit. There are historic places and so many places that are both beautiful and historically significant.
Okay, you told us that you are interested in neuromarketing from really many years, but in your daily life, are there specific neuromarketing, principles or insights that you find yourself applying regularly? Is there something that you can apply on a daily basis?
Well, I think that in personal interactions, we use some of these techniques all the time, even though we don't know that they are based in behavioral science or in psychology. And I think that one thing is Robert Cialdini was one of the early voices in this space. It must be 30 or 40 years ago now. He published his book, Influence, which enumerated then 6 principles of influence, how people can change the minds of others, gain compliance from others using these fundamental principles. Now there are 7. He added one a few years ago. But the one that we often use in daily life, and this isn't even just a business thing, businesses do it too, of course, but we use reciprocation. And that means if you do something for somebody else, even a very small thing, a very small favor, they're much more likely then to do something for you if you ask them. And this has been proven time and time again. And we all do that. We do something for somebody else, not with the intention of now we can get something from them in return, but we know that we employ this by helping people. We know that we'll get help when we need it.
Okay, now I have a question. Do you have any favorite strategies by neuromarketing?
Boy, I think really my favorite strategies are the ones that work in the particular situation that you have, the particular problem you're trying to solve. There's I think, so many different tools that you can use. I mentioned the 7 principles of influence that Bob Cialdini has come up with. And one thing I'd say too is, the whole social science area has been questioned in recent years as to whether some of the findings are not real. One thing I can assure you of is that Cialdini's principles are real because not only have his experiments been replicated in academic settings, but thousands of business people have used those same techniques in their own A/B testing and so on to show that they work. So some of the more strange behavioral science findings that have only been done by one lab someplace with a small sample size, those it's fair to question. But something like these principles from Bob Cialdini, or things like loss aversion, one of Daniel Kahneman's findings. These are very fundamental principles that have been tested and tested and tested again and again, both in academic and commercial settings. So, I don't think I have a favorite technique, but I think that, some are just so simple and so obvious that they make sense to use. For instance, a social proof. If you can show that other people are using your product or your service, in a variety of ways, either by numbers, like we have 10,000 users of this software, or by testimonials where people praise your product and what it's done for their business. That's something that really is going to work almost all the time. Maybe 1 time out of 10, social proof isn't going to work for some reason, but 9 times out of 10, or maybe even more, maybe 95 times out of 100, a social proof is going to work. So it's one of the simplest things that you can do. And one thing I'll add as a sort of additional hack, there's research that shows that a testimonial is good. A testimonial with a name is better. A testimonial with a name and a company name and a role, perhaps, assuming the role is relevant to whatever the product is, that's better. And photos and videos make it even more persuasive. So the ideal thing would be if, say, you're selling design software, if you could have a designer at a prominent brand praise your product in a short video, that would really hit all of the buttons there to make it a very persuasive testimonial. Anonymous testimonials with a couple of initials, they don't really work very well.
Yes, of course, because sometimes we can write alone this testimonial, right? And when we have
and
video,
the more, exactly. The more relevant it is, the more believable it is, the more you have photo or video evidence that, okay, this is a real human being who really is the person that they say they are. That all goes to making it more believable.
Thanks.
Maybe do you know, or you can share with us some recent developments in neuromarketing? There is some new that can be used for marketers,
or maybe with AI.
Sure. Well, right. Well, let me do a couple of things. If I forget the AI part, Karolina, remind me in a minute, okay? But first of all, when I started writing about neuromarketing, I was really mostly interested in applying the tools of neuroscience to seeing what marketing worked, what advertising worked. So, for instance, putting people in an fMRI machine and measuring their brain activity, or putting an EEG cap on their head to measure brainwaves externally, doing things like eye tracking or biometrics like measuring their pulse, measuring their breathing rate, galvanic skin response, all of these sort of hard scientific measures of how people were responding to specific stimuli. So that, for instance, a brand could show people 3 different versions of an advertisement and see how they responded through these various neuroscience and biometric measures. That was sort of traditional neuromarketing. But what I found was, as I was writing about this, that first of all, many of these techniques weren't really fully developed early on. There were companies out there offering these services, but not all of them really could prove that their stuff worked. The techniques were so expensive then that only big brands could use them. So I began focusing a little bit more on behavioral science, applying the ideas of people like Bob Cialdini or other scientists, and using some of these really useful academic concepts that were coming out of laboratories that really didn't have a lot of exposure to the business world, because most academics, they want to publish their research. They want to see it in the academic journals. That's good for them, their careers, and so on. And many of them don't really try to apply it to business. Either they don't have the interest. Often they'll say at the very end, at the end of a 50-page study, one paragraph saying, this could be used by business people in marketing with some little reason why, without actually understanding much of it. And so what I really took on is the task as a guy who's been both a corporate guy, a corporate strategist, and then an entrepreneur for years and years, is taking these academic ideas out of the lab, out of these research papers, and presenting them in a way that was practical for business people to apply. And so those are sort of the two faces of neuromarketing. There was this sort of hard neuroscience and biometrics piece that was initially only accessible to big brands. And then there was behavioral science that could be applied by anybody. Any company of any size can use social proof or use authority or some of these other Cialdini principles. So that's one trend. But now you asked me what's new. What's new in the last few years is that some of these sort of harder neuroscience techniques and biometrics and tools like eye tracking have become much more affordable and much more accessible. It used to be that if you wanted to perform certain kinds of measurements, you would have to bring people into a laboratory setting and wire them up and then expose them to whatever. And of course, that's expensive. It's tedious. You have to recruit subjects to come in. You're probably not going to get your customers to go to a lab someplace and get wired up. So you're going to have to find substitutes for your customers. Not the best technology, really, in certain ways. But what now is happening, there are tools, one that uses smartwatches. And like most smartwatch brands, Android or iPhone, iOS smartphone, to do those same kinds of measurements. They are measuring from the wrist, but they are saying that they can measure they measure two variables. The company that does this, immersion, which is sort of how emotionally engaged somebody is with whatever it is they're viewing. And then psychological safety. Does the person feel safer or more threatened? And this is so inconspicuous, people forget about it. You know, if you're walking around a store with an EEG cap on and a big belt pack with Wi-Fi, it's not going to be a very normal situation. But what if just you're wearing your normal smartwatch with your phone in your pocket, you are unaware really that after a few minutes that you're being recorded and you're simply reacting in a very normal way. So not only can you measure things like response to ads or content or videos or say a movie trailer using this technique, but you can have people walk around a store or a retail store. You can equip people with this before they go into a training session or at a conference to see, those forums you see at conferences where after every talk there's, well, how would you rate this talk, the presenter's knowledge, and so on. And most people don't bother to fill them out, or they just don't pay much attention. But here you can actually see which presenters are engaging people, whether they're good up to a point, and then they start to lose the audience when they change the subject. And this kind of information that is really very valuable. Accenture, the big consulting company, is using this to evaluate training, for example. But there are other techniques, eye tracking, seeing what people look at by measuring their eyeballs. The direction is important. You can look, for instance, give people a print advertisement, a magazine advertisement, and see what they look at. Are they looking at what you want them to? The headline, the features, the product, or are they looking at something that really isn't part of the sales process, the attractive model or whatever? So that used to be, again, something that you had to do in a laboratory setting. Now it can be done remotely via device cams like webcams and even phone and tablet cams. Then the results are not quite as sharp and well-defined because the technology just isn't as good as special glasses that cost thousands and thousands of dollars, or special camera devices that, again, are very, very expensive. But you can get results that are, in many cases, good enough for what you need, and it can be done very quickly. You don't have to bring people into a laboratory. You can have subjects anywhere in the world, and you give them this task. They look at whatever, the content you want them to view, measure their responses, and you can have results back in a matter of hours compared to a project that would normally take weeks probably to set up with subjects and everything else. So that reduces the cost tremendously. It's available as a SaaS type service now. It is software as a service. And then even beyond that, there are now predictive models that use AI that they've been trained on thousands and thousands of human eye tracking studies to know what people will look at in a particular picture, image, content, whatever. And then AI predicts what people look at. And there are multiple providers of this. It's quite inexpensive, and they claim 90 to 95% or even higher accuracy in predicting what humans would look at. Now, as you get cheaper and cheaper, the results are probably not quite as reliable as this super lab settings. But on the other hand, it lets you extend these techniques to many more problems, smaller companies, smaller problems. You'd never do a giant study to see what image to put on a particular web page. But with this, you can. It's cheap enough that you can say, okay, run 2 versions of these pages, see what people look at. And you get instant results back. So, to me, the sort of democratization of neuromarketing is the key trend. This was accelerated during the pandemic because you couldn't bring people into labs. So, companies that had been focused on that and had been maybe working on some other stuff, suddenly everybody was saying, okay, we've got to figure out how to do this without bringing people into a controlled setting and let them do it either in their home or at an event or whatever.
Yeah, for me, it's a fascinating kind of topic because, for example, when you have go people to laboratory, of course, you have clear results. But is it true that people look at phones, at smartwatch, or etc., right? And they have any other situations and something what can change their focus, right? And maybe it's a question that how to find this point where have more focused science, and when we have not clear this testing. When we have find the balance between laboratory testing and request, and with requesting from, for example, from home.
Oh, right. Okay. I think it's really a cost thing. For instance, if this year ads on the Super Bowl, the big U.S. football championship, cost $7 million for a 30-second spot. Buying half a minute of time costs $7 million. So for that, I would do the best laboratory testing I could do on whatever ad I was going to run or the various versions of the ad to try and predict whether it was as optimized as possible to engage the viewers and then end up with the result that you want to. So, on the other hand, for, a couple of variations of a part of a website, you're not going to be doing that in a laboratory setting because you can't justify the cost. So there, you would use one of these less expensive techniques. And of course, as I said, beyond even using these measurement techniques for evaluating how people respond, you can use some of these principles that have been established by scientists as a direction to go. Although one thing I always recommend, Karolina, is that you never assume that something is going to work because it worked for another company or it worked in the laboratory. As I said, social proof, how many customers do we have or what do the customers say about us? That works almost all of the time, but there will be certain situations where it doesn't work. And that's why it's important for any size business to at least to the extent that they can, do testing. In other words, don't just assume that it's going to work and change your design. Instead, test the versions, like test the old version against the new version. See what happens. I mean, I remember some years back when maybe the websites were a little bit more static. Companies would do a website redesign. They would say, well, boy, our design is a couple years old now. We really need to freshen it up. And they give it to the designers. They have some meetings and decide what the new design would look like and have more meetings. And then finally they'd roll out the design without ever testing it. If the most successful e-commerce retailer on the planet by far is Amazon. And ask yourself, when was the last time Amazon redesigned their website? And you'd probably say, well, I don't know, have they ever redesigned their website? And they have never done one of these giant website redesigns. Instead, what they are doing is testing every element constantly. Every small design element. How do we put the price? So do we put it in a colored type? Do we make it bigger or smaller? Where do we put the description? Do we have a long description or a short description? And so on. Every single element on their page is there because it's been tested and it has worked best in that format. So if you see something on Amazon, or maybe some of the big travel websites are very good at using behavioral science, and they're also very good at testing. So if you go to, say, a booking.com and you see something that's on their website and it's been there for more than a week or two, then it's there because it helps convert customers. It works better than whatever alternatives they tested. And so you can learn from that as a business without conducting all of your own research. But if you are going to make a change, if you are going to try a new call to action, a new headline, a different homepage, try doing an A/B test at least, just to see what happens. You may find that what you thought was better actually isn't better. So, use the science, but always back it up by testing. Treat the science as a hypothesis, as a suggestion for what you should do, not as proof that this is going to work.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, I have some question about Amazon and Allegro. Allegro is a Polish marketplace. It's like Amazon. I think a little better than Amazon, but it's it works in Poland and in Czech at this moment. Mm-hmm. And the question is about selling online, about e-commerce, because our podcasts focus on exploring ways to apply neuromarketing and marketing techniques on Allegro. How do you think? Are there any strategies or techniques when you can apply in this context? Think about Amazon, because Allegro is really similar. Mm-hmm. How to apply neuromarketing techniques on such platforms?
Okay, you mean for individual sellers on those platforms? Or for Allegro itself, or for companies that sell through Allegro?
On Allegro, about 99% sellers are companies.
Right, okay. Right. So I think that those strategies, obviously, you can't, if you're selling multiple products, maybe hundreds of products, you can't optimize each page for each product and each description and so on. But what you can do is apply some of these general principles. Social proof. If you have proof that customers like this product. On Amazon, and I assume on Allegro, they have user reviews or customer reviews. That is a form of social proof. So encouraging your customers to post reviews is one thing that you can do, assuming that your product is actually going to get good reviews, and making that as easy as possible, reminding them, giving them a direct link to where they could post a review if that's possible. That's going to help your social proof. If you have any expert endorsements of your product, and an expert could be somebody who is actually an expert in that space. It could be a celebrity of some kind. Those are both different types of authority. But if you're selling some kind of athletic equipment, if you've had somebody who is a recognizable sports figure, or maybe even has a recognizable position, a coach for a particular team that nobody really recognizes the name, but at least, okay, this person's a coach, and having them endorse your product, that's going to invoke what Robert Cialdini calls authority. In other words, somebody's opinion that they should be knowledgeable and you can trust them. And sometimes that works with celebrity too. There is a classic example of in the States, and maybe the brand is global, of the George Foreman grill. George Foreman was the World Boxing Championship for years, and one of the best known boxers. He endorsed this grill. It's just like this little sort of countertop electric griddle thing, and became the George Foreman grill. And because of his celebrity, he was not an expert on cooking or grilling, but because of his celebrity, the product took off, and eventually he did become sort of a recognized authority on grilling because his name was on millions of grills around the world. So, those are two things that you can do, and just about any size company can use those things to make their products seem more appealing. Because really what you're trying to do on a site where there are many other sellers, like on Amazon, I don't know if it's as bad on Allegro, but if you look at a product, there's going to be 10 other products that look exactly like that. And you're going to have as a customer, a difficult time deciding who to buy with. So anything that you as an individual seller can do to make your offering stand out a little more, to give customers that confidence, that trust, that will be important in standing out from the other sellers of similar products.
Okay, thank you very much for this answer. But you told about reviews, and it's I also run a small e-commerce company, and I know on a daily basis it's really difficult to get a review from a customer. Do you have any idea how to ask or how to increase the number of reviews from your customers if you sell something online?
It's a good question. I think that there are a couple of things that you can do that are sort of easy right off the bat. In fact, right now I've got an advanced copy of a book I'm reading. It's all about how to get reviews, but it's not yet published. But you might find that interesting when it comes out. But a couple of things that you can do are, first of all, to remind a customer that they can do a review. You can suggest that it might be helpful to you. You can use that as an opportunity to be sure that they're satisfied with the product and correct any issues that they might have before they post a bad review. You can point out perhaps that will help other customers. Some people, an appeal to altruism might work, saying, hey, help other customers find our product or understand how it works. So those are, a couple of little levers you can pull. You can there are probably certain things you cannot do or you aren't supposed to do. For instance, giving them something either in advance or because you could give somebody some small gift of some kind, some small free thing, and then ask them for a review. But that would probably, I know that would run afoul of Amazon standards, and it probably would violate Allegro as well. But I mean, that's because that would invoke reciprocation. Even if it wasn't anything really big or significant, you might be able to get away with even a download of some kind. Hey, you bought this new product. Here's an additional piece of information of how other people have used this product. Not just a manual, but maybe some examples that wouldn't be seen as a bribe, but would invoke reciprocation. The other thing that is generally very common advice I see from people who have whose business it is to get more reviews for anything, whether it's products or doctors. Doctor reviews are very important in the United States now, is to make it easy. In other words, first of all, you request the review. First of all, you ask them if there's any reason, why, if they're not completely happy, they should contact you. But then encourage them to post a review and give them as direct a link as possible to where they would do it. In other words, don't make them hunt for the product again and find the post review thing. If it's technically possible, give them a direct link to post their review. Just making it easier, that'll reduce friction, and that alone will get you more reviews.
Okay, I have a question for you. Do you know any tools which analyze neuromarketing resources with AI?
Well, okay, I mentioned the fact that now you've got AI eye tracking predictors. That's one. In other words, you're simply showing them your print ad or your video, and AI will predict what people will look at. So that's the one that comes to mind most obviously. I'm sure people are working on tools for analyzing more complicated content, But I do think what you can do is, for instance, if you have a product that you're trying to sell, you can ask one of the generative tools out there to apply different neuromarketing techniques or suggest ways to apply them. And what I find here is you have to be very specific and intentional in the way you prompt them. And I've used ChatGPT 4, Claude AI, the Bard, and others. I've had probably the best results with ChatGPT 4 and with Claude AI. But instead of saying, you're a neuromarketing expert, how would you promote this product? That will get you a very generic garbage answer. What you can do, though, is, and I've tried this in different ways. I've asked, for instance, which of Robert Cialdini's 7 principles would you apply to this product marketing effort, and describe the product or, exactly what you're trying to do. And it could be to, get more travelers to fly your airplane, anything. By doing it that way, it's sort of narrowing the scope of the recommendation, and you'll get a much better answer. And I've had some good results with that. In fact, I was doing a conference to a medical group about patient experience, which I don't do that much about patient experience, mostly customer experience and employee experience. But of course, patients are customers too. And so I did that speech, but I was also supposed to do like a little short session for a private group of VIPs. And I said, okay, I'm going to see if I could apply some of these ideas using AI. In other words, if you don't want to call Roger, you could use AI to get some of these same ideas to help you improve your practice. And I tried asking ChatGPT and Claude, either, imagine you are Roger Dooley, what would you recommend? And I got not very good answers until I asked, in fact, when Claude said, I can't be Roger Dooley, I'm an AI. So it doesn't respond to that, you are an expert prompt. He says, no, I'm not an expert, I'm AI. But I prompted it finally in a way that using the ideas of Roger Dooley, author of Friction and Brainfluence, how would you suggest that these medical professionals increase the number of patients in their practice? And it came back with a list of answers. The first 3 of those answers were exact points that I had used in the presentation that I prepared for my head. So this was using my ideas that it had probably gotten by reading my books, because some of the AIs have digested hundreds of thousands of books through questionable techniques of using online book databases that aren't necessarily completely legal. In other words, their publishers have not granted permission for this, but those databases exist. And Claude came up with really, I think, a spookily accurate answer for that. I mean, its top ideas were literally my top ideas. So it did that very well. But at the same time, these techniques aren't perfect. For instance, I asked a couple of AIs. In Friction, I talk about how government bureaucracy is bad for the success of countries. It's bad for their own citizens. And I never used, for some reason, the term citizen experience in the book. I talked about bureaucracy. I talked about productivity, difference in national success, in citizen happiness, and some other stuff. But I never used the term citizen experience. So when I asked AI, what does Roger Dooley think about citizen experience in Friction? It was like, he doesn't mention it. So in other words, it's not smart enough to deduce that, okay, he's talking about citizens and countries here. Clearly, this is about their experience. Since these are basically word prediction machines, or, they don't always, they don't understand the content. Like a human could read that chapter and immediately answer that question. Even a not so bright human could have read the chapter and come up with a good response to questions about citizen experience. But for AIs, at least at this point, maybe by next week it'll be different. They really couldn't do a good job with that. They don't understand the content in the same way that a human does.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Since yesterday, we have a new government in Poland.
Yes, congratulations.
Roger, you told that bureaucracy is bad. And I think that definitely you should come into Poland and convince our politicians that...
it's a problematic for us.
Right. Okay. I think that Poland is... Tomasz, Poland is not unique in that respect. I would say that most countries have too much bureaucracy, some more than others. And some have worked to fight it. Others just sort of seem to tolerate it. In the book, I use India as an example that has taken steps recently to make it easier to do things there, but was absolutely legendary for its bureaucracy. I talked about how a writer who moved there to work for, I think, Financial Times, brought his 2 cats with him. And they were easy to get into the country, but to get them out of the country when it was time for him to move back home, he needed an export permit. And he spent days in government offices over a period of weeks trying to get the necessary export documentation to take his cats out of the country. And other horror stories of an entrepreneur who tried to build a factory in his hometown and bring it business, but again, couldn't get it done because of the bureaucracy, and ended up building a very successful business that was manufacturing in Puerto Rico, I think, instead of in his hometown in India that he was trying to help. But this happens in every country. It happens in Holland. It happens in the United States. And, I think that it just takes leadership that is committed to taking some steps. And you can't change everything overnight, but even to picking 1 or 2 areas and saying, okay, this can be a test case. Where is some of the most time-wasting, unnecessary effort, taking place, and how can we improve those specific things? When people start to see things improve, then they will in turn say, hey, we could do this over here. We could do it over there. One example from the States comes to mind. I had Cass Sunstein on. He is the co-author of Nudge with Nobel winner Richard Thaler. And Nudge is all about, again, how making things easier makes those things more likely to happen. And Sunstein for a while worked in the White House in the U.S. government. And through his efforts, there was a program for getting food to kids who were hungry, school kids that did not have enough food to eat at home. They were from poor families. And what they found was that more than half the students that were eligible for this kind of help weren't getting it. And why? Because of the paperwork. There were multiple complicated forms to fill out that these people, just were not either, in some cases, maybe not capable of filling out, but in other cases, they're too busy. If you're living at the edge of poverty, you don't have a lot of extra time to fill out forms. You may need somebody's help in navigating that. And what they did was they eliminated almost all of the forms. And immediately, there were 15 million more kids that were able to be fed because of this. And Sunstein was almost crying a little bit when he was saying this, because it was such an emotional thing for him that by simplifying this one process, they were able to get millions and millions of more children who would have been hungry, get them the food they needed. And, to me, that's the sort of accomplishment that by eliminating some bureaucracy, you can have a huge impact.
Mm-hmm. It's a really great example how less bureaucracy can help people. I hope that our new Prime Minister Donald Tusk will be listening to our podcast, and maybe he invite you to Poland.
Well, hey, I'll be on the next plane when the invitation comes in.
Okay, a little joke, but I know also that you are helping companies building stronger brands or enhancing sales effectiveness. If someone from Poland want to invite you, how do you think, what kind of company could benefit most from your expertise?
Well, what I've found is, Tomasz, that just about any company, B2B, business to business, business to consumer, B2C, they can all benefit from these ideas. And the reason for that is, even in the B2B world, everyone is human. Customers are still human. We think of as consumers as being emotional, as being driven by non-conscious influences and whatnot, and they can be persuaded. But when it comes to business, we think of them as, well, these are rational decision makers. They're comparing prices, they're comparing specifications, and they make a rational decision that, like a robot almost. And that is totally not true. Even B2B decision makers are human. Yes, they do have to be sure that certain things are true. In other words, if they're buying industrial machinery, the machinery has to be appropriate for the job. I mean, if it doesn't meet the specifications, then it's not going to work and it's useless. So there are rational elements for sure, but beyond that, they too are driven by non-conscious factors. What is this going to mean for me and the company? If this goes wrong, what's going to happen to me? They may not even be consciously thinking about this, but they know that if they buy new CRM software and the project goes bad, that it's going to be horrible for the company. It's going to be horrible for them. They want to know, how are people going to see me if this is a success? Will I get promoted? Will people look at me differently? And there are a lot of emotional factors that do go into this. And in terms of marketing, in terms of sales, you have to address not just those rational factors. Yes, our product is better. Yes, we can get it done in less time than the other guy, but also these emotional concerns. And I just talked to, not too long ago, Matt Dixon. He's the author of The Challenger Sale and then more recently The Jolt Effect. And what he found was that indecision is the biggest barrier to sales. That most lost sales don't occur because another company got the deal. They occur because the customer didn't do anything. They couldn't decide and they did nothing. And that's so true in B2B markets where, particularly for things like, imagine, software, it's a tough decision. And often it's better it seems like it's easier, safer, just to sort of go ahead with what you've got, even though it's not the best. That something else is better, but it's just easier to keep doing nothing. And so, using those, understanding what the emotional factors are, in fact, one of his expressions was, we talk about fear of missing out, FOMO, where wow, if I don't do this, I'm going to miss out on this gain. He says what's a bigger factor is FOMO, fear of messing up. If I make this decision and it goes bad, then I'm to blame. I'm going to have a problem. Where if you do nothing, well, nobody's really to blame for that. It was a group decision. The committee met. They decided not to do anything. So it's safer. But you've got to address not just the sort of rational concerns, but how do you address that fear of messing up by providing assurances, an exact roadmap of how things are going to progress. What's going to happen if we have a problem at this stage? What kind of additional resources can we apply? And so on to reduce that fear and ultimately make the sale. So yeah, to me, every type of business, whether it is B2B or B2C, needs to understand these basic neuromarketing techniques, these use of understanding how the human brain works.
Oh, what you said right now is for me very personality informations because, all the time when I work in marketing, many people, see only on the results, only on analytics. And sometimes I feel that I burn inside because I give more attention for emotional people, for what they feel. And my bosses or managers don't interested a lot of this. It was for them only, how many they have or how I can show the results and statistics. And yeah, I feel inside that you catch my heart right now.
That's a common thing, I think, with many bosses. They operate not from a knowledge of how these results are going to change, but just from their feeling. They say, well, I wouldn't be influenced by that. It's like, sometimes they believe, oh, these other people might be influenced by those things, but it wouldn't change my mind. Of course, that's not true because we're all human. And even when we think we're not going to be affected by these sort of non-conscious drivers, they're still there. They actually work, but it's very common. And sometimes maybe, Karolina, what you can do is sort of combine the analytic approach with the emotional approach. And if you can show that changing an appeal using understanding of psychology, of emotion helps, then, and it affects the numbers, you can combine the two, say, hey, look, we did this intervention and now look at the before and after results. And it's good to measure that anyway, because, you need to know not every intervention is going to work. But, I think that you can, by demonstrating the difference, in results, that's how you get more credibility. And then the next time you have an idea, it will be regarded maybe with a little bit more weight.
Okay. Thank you.
I have, I think, really important question, and it's and probably Karolina also want to talk something about this, about ethics in neuromarketing.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's really many people have some thoughts about applying marketing and neuromarketing techniques. And how do you respond to ethical concerns about neuromarketing, particularly to view that it might be used for manipulation?
Right. I think it's important to understand the difference between, say, ethical persuasion and manipulation. And I'll mention a few things. First of all, Robert Cialdini invented the science of influence, and everything he writes, everything that he puts in a speech is always mentions ethical persuasion many, many times, because these same techniques can be used not just for good, but for bad behavior. What I would suggest is this: first of all, for the original neuroscience techniques that measured people's responses to ads, there was a big concern that advertisers were going to be able to somehow hack customer brains, that they would be able to create these super ads that would turn their customers just into mindless drones. They'd go to the store and buy. That didn't happen. It was never going to happen. If that was even possible, somebody on Madison Avenue in advertising would have figured it out years before, even without the benefits of neuroscience. They would have found those magic buttons to push. Also early on, there was a book that talked about the buy button in your customer's brain, and that scared people too, because they imagined that somehow marketers would now be able to push that buy button and, again, get people to buy stuff that they didn't want or need. So those are concerns, but the concerns that somehow they're going to be super powerful, that is not true. It hasn't happened yet, and I don't see it happening anytime soon. But on the other hand, I think that neuromarketing techniques are like anything else. They can be used for good or bad. You can have just take advertising, forget about neuromarketing or behavioral science. Advertising can either be honest, truthful, helpful, or it can be dishonest. It can be manipulative because it's not really telling the truth, or it's omitting parts of the truth that would change the customer's mind. So I think that you have to view it from that perspective. One of my favorite ways of talking about ethics in neuromarketing actually goes back to Zig Ziglar, who's one of the most famous sales authors of all time, one of the most famous salespeople of all time. He said that the most powerful tool for persuasion you have is your own integrity. And by that, I think what he meant was that if you know that you are getting the customer to a better place, that they won't regret the purchase, they will feel better 2 days later, a week later, a month later, a year later, than you are justified in helping them make that decision. Because, I mean, he wrote an entire book about different ways to close the sale. Presumptive close. Do you want this delivered on Tuesday or Wednesday? And, things like that sound manipulative. But often, what he was doing was combating what I just talked about, indecision, and helping the customer make that decision, because he always felt that he would be getting the customer to where they wanted to be, and they just needed a little bit of nudge to get there. So, to me, I think that if you can honestly say to yourself that, yes, we're going to use this particular technique, whether it's social proof or authority or any of the other things, scarcity is a big one. Things that are in short supply are more desirable than things that are in ample supply. If you're going to get the customer to a good place anyway, then that's fine. If you're going to get them to make a decision that 24 hours later they're going to regret, then that's not a good thing. And, I think there are certainly a few gray areas. I mentioned some of these travel sites. If you go to any travel site where you'll suddenly see there's only 2 rooms left in this hotel at this price, there's only 1 airline seat left at this price, and this is scarcity. This is telling you that, okay, it's doing a few things. First of all, as I said, things that are more scarce are more desirable in general. Plus, it's creating FOMO, fear of missing out, and urgency. Like, wow, if I don't act now, I might end up paying a lot more for this hotel room or for this airline seat or whatever. And in some cases, you really wonder if that is a legitimate scarcity trigger, because maybe you book that room and you go back the next day and, hey, that room is there at the same price, or for, almost exactly the same price. And, to me, that's kind of a gray area. I know that I've talked to some of the people, and they do have a rationale that they can justify this, it's there. But to me, it's a little bit of a grayish area, right? Where, you're maybe not, it doesn't look like it's totally honest and transparent to the customer. And to me, so that's marginal. And of course, you can totally create fake scarcity. I remember a few years ago, there was an electronic site that I visited that when I went there, it had this gigantic sale. Everything was half off, and the deal ended at midnight. And it was all these prices, big red, yellow, flashing prices and whatnot. And said, wow, I probably ought to buy. I did not buy that day. I went back the next day, and it was the exact same thing. It was like, prices expire at midnight. Now, that was actually false scarcity, and to me, that would be totally unethical. But I think you have to look at what you're doing and say, okay, if I had explained this to a normal person, first of all, would this seem honest and transparent and truthful? And that's one measure. And then also, am I steering the customer into something that they're going to ultimately appreciate, or something that they're going to feel like they made a bad decision? And if you can deal with those issues, then I think you'll be doing things in a very ethical way.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I think that it's very important to see between persuasion and between manipulation. But for example, in Poland, we have a problem because it's many ways to show manipulation. For example, when you go to supermarket, everywhere you see a lot of strategies to manipulation customers. And for example, when anybody hear about neuromarketing, first question is, what is it? And second question, probably it's manipulation, right? And for example, this is a problem because sometimes we have a less time to show, difference between persuasion and manipulation. And would you have any short type for us how we can explain that it's not a manipulation?
Well, I think that, again, first of all, you want to make sure that whatever is happening is truthful and transparent. That there's, if you're doing something that's not true, then that's manipulation. It's not good at all. Beyond that, I guess you can question, well, if you're simply helping people make a decision about buying something. I remember Martin Lindstrom wrote in one of his books about some of the techniques that retailers use, like supermarkets use, to somehow change the way people feel about their products. One brand would create these signs that look like chalkboards, like where you put the catch of the day for the latest fish, and the fishmonger writes it in chalk on a board. Well, they would create signs, printed signs that look like that, just to sort of give that illusion that somebody just posted this using chalk, even though they didn't. Or I know in my actually both of my local supermarkets, they'll sometimes put some huge whole fish in the display on the ice. Now, I've never seen anybody buy one of those huge whole fish. Maybe somebody does. But what that's doing is it's creating this illusion of sort of fresh from the ocean, fresh from the lake, that then sort of permeates all of the rest of the products they're selling, some of which may even have been previously frozen. But having this very visible sign of freshness there convinces people to that, wow, these guys are really bringing fresh fish to the market. So now those things, are they manipulation? I don't think there's anything wrong with them. I think it's maybe just smart marketing, that they're not lying about it. If they're selling you something as fresh that was frozen, then that would be manipulation. That would be wrong. But I think some of these techniques they use are normal. It's like by putting a big sale sign with a reduced price next to something. That's fine. It will light up your brain. There's research showing from various brain studies that when people go down the supermarket aisle, they see those yellow tags next to things, and they do cause people's brain to light up a little bit, as if they're expecting this reward of a cheaper price. And that's true even if it isn't a cheaper price. Even if it's just something that says great value, for example, that doesn't, it's not cheaper, but it's still creating a little bit of activity in that person's brain that might induce them to buy the product. But again, I don't really see that as being an unethical manipulation. It's just sort of a good sales technique.
Okay, for one example, which I saw, it was like write a price and subtitles that buy two products for half for 50% less, but this price, it was calculating, and it was result the price. So for example, the chocolate costs 15 zlotys, one box of chocolate, and give information, you can buy this box of chocolates and pay for second 50% less, but on this information it was wrote I don't remember 12 zlotys. So when you buy this chocolate, you see that not first price it's 12 and second box is, for example, 50% less, so it's by 6. No, it was like totally price. So what do you think about this?
Well, that's wrong. That's just wrong. It's anything like that should be very truthful. And the customer should never be surprised when they go to checkout.
Yes.
That's just wrong. And companies shouldn't whether they did that on purpose or whether it was, somebody made an error, who knows? But, that should not happen. One of the controversies, over the, years in the States has been, these retail prices that nobody ever pays. In other words, this, shirt, costs, $80, but we're going to sell it for $40. And see, it's half off, but nobody ever paid $80 for that shirt. This is just a way that they price it at that so that they can mark it down to cheaper levels. And one company a while back tried getting rid of that practice in the States. They said, okay, we're going to have everyday low prices. This was J.C. Penney, a big retailer of primarily clothing, but also other goods. They were a department store. They said, we're going to have everyday low prices. We'll occasionally have sales. We'll mark some stuff down, but by and large, we're not going to fool around with these crazy inflated list prices and then discounts all the time. We want our customers to know when they walk in the store, they're going to get the best value every time. And this seemed like a very appealing idea from a business standpoint, maybe, but it totally backfired. They lost a huge amount of their business, and they were probably close to going bankrupt until they fired that CEO and they put in a different CEO who went back to the high prices, but lots and lots of sales where, say 40%, say 50% all the time. And ultimately that company didn't do very well anyway, but nevertheless, you could see the effects of people respond to those discount offers. And, to me, that's, there actually are some laws that if you're going to advertise something as a retail price, it has to be for sale at that price at some point, I think. But it seems like stores mostly ignore that because everything's always on sale.
Okay, last question from me. I know, Roger, that you have your own podcast, Brainfluence. Let's talk like podcaster with podcaster. Why did you choose podcasting as a medium for sharing your knowledge?
Well, interesting question, Tomasz. Actually, I use it more as a tool, not so much for sharing my own knowledge, but for gaining knowledge from other people and being able to talk to some really smart people and sharing that knowledge with my audience. Because most of I do have some solo podcasts where I talk about a particular idea or technique or something, but the vast majority of them have been interviews where I do what you're doing. I talk to somebody and I try and extract ideas that I think will be useful to my audience. And to me, that's fun in a lot of ways because, I get to talk to people who I wouldn't normally get a chance to talk to because maybe they have a new book coming out or something else that's going on, and they're willing to talk to somebody who's not like a giant name in podcasting. Plus, just these interactions often produce insights that hopefully draw on both of ours because because I'm sort of in the business and I can often ask questions that are maybe better able to expand on the guest's knowledge and expertise than, say, just a reporter might, where they're asking sort of generic questions. And to me, that's when we create some real value. If I can ask an interesting question or have a back and forth discussion with somebody who is really smart, I think that's where we're really delivering some value to the audience.
Okay. So it's the last question from my side. Do you have any new projects? Do you working with your new book or something like that?
Well, I don't have any projects to announce right now. I've got a couple of book ideas that I'm sort of working on in background a little bit. Nothing too extensive yet, but a couple of ideas and directions for that. I'm trying to create more content at Forbes.com, where I have a column and do a better job of getting ideas out there. And I've been doing a little bit of work on a Spanish website because I found that there's great interest in neuromarketing in Spanish-speaking countries, both in Spain and in Latin America. So I'm trying to create a little bit more content for that audience too.
Okay, thank you.
Roger, I want to really thank you for this interview. And I can tell you that I, as a podcaster, I love interviews because I learn really a lot. You are our third guest in our podcast, so we are new with interviewing people, but I want to really thank you for accepting our invitation.
Well, it's been my pleasure, Tomasz and Karolina. And by the way, I would love to connect with your audience. I'm very easy to find on LinkedIn or just via rogerdooley.com, where you can find links to my social stuff, my books, and everything else.
Okay, of course, I recommended Roger from my side because from his book started my interest about neuromarketing. So, of course, our audience, we recommend Roger, and I am really glad to can meet you, Roger.
It's been my pleasure.
Thank you very much.
That's all for today. Thank you for your time, and we hope our podcast was very interesting and helpful for you.
If you enjoyed our show, please subscribe to our podcast and be sure to join our Facebook group.
Listen to you in the next episode.